everyone. Welcome. Thank you for spending your Wednesday evening with us. I am super pumped to be here. My name is Mona Shamali. I am the director of the New Leaders Initiative, which is a program of Earth Island Institute. Today, we are going to have a fabulous panel, Climate Policy, BYA Youth Perspectives, which will feature two 2025 alumni in conversation with a project director, a director of a project of Earth Island Institute. She will be facilitating, and then if there are questions from the audience, I will come back on and moderate that section of the panel. So bear with me. I have a little bit of reading to do. Hang on tight. It's not that much, but I'm going to do some introductions. So here we go. Thank you for spending your Wednesday night with us again. It's going to be very informative and interesting. This is a part of a new ongoing panel where we feature a few Broward Youth Award alumni in a more in-depth conversation for the length of 1 hour. Before we get started, I do have a few words. It won't take long. This panel is produced by the New Leaders Initiative, which is a North American, including Canada and Mexico, environmental leadership program that builds and cultivates youth leaders by building their capacity through intense week-long trainings, workshops, clinics, skill building, activities, training, writing, the arts, and all means to call to action, including university fellowships, and finally, public-facing events in the Bay Area. Two of the panelists tonight are alumni of the Broward Youth Award, the flagship program of New Leaders. Each year, out of a competitive pool of applicants from North America, this year there were 450 applicants, including Canada and Mexico, the Broward Youth Award selects 6 youth to participate in our programming, based on demonstrated outstanding leadership on an environmental project. The award celebrates their achievements by making short documentaries about them, providing a cash prize, and culminates in a leadership week and celebration of their work. The Leadership Week aims to build capacity and cultivate leadership so that our youth leaders can achieve even more and make even more of a ripple or an impact through workshops led by experts, clinics, trainings, leadership development activities, and strength building in team environments. New Leaders and the Broward Youth Awards are a program of a larger organization, which is Earth Island Institute. Founded in 1982, Earth Island Institute is an international environmental organization and fiscal sponsor to more than 75 projects working in the areas of climate change solutions, conservation, environmental justice, indigenous communities, wildlife protection, women's environmental leadership, sustainable agriculture and food systems, community resilience, and more. The organization also includes a legal division, Earth Island Advocates, a youth development department, which is us, New Leaders Initiative, and an award-winning magazine, Earth Island Journal. For more information about us, please visit our website at www.earthisland.org. And now I'm going to present the bios of the 3 people who will be on the panel this evening. Our facilitator for this evening is Renata Brillinger, who is the executive director of the California Climate and Agriculture Network, which we will call CALCAN. Renata co-founded CALCAN in 2009 and has served as the executive director since then. CALCAN advances state and federal policy to catalyze the powerful climate solutions offered by sustainable and organic agriculture. CALCAN uses policy to move California agriculture towards a system that is increasingly resilient and just. Renata has 30 years of experience in sustainable agriculture policy and food systems projects and nonprofit administration. Prior to CALCAN, she was Energy and Agriculture Program Director at the Climate Protection Campaign, now the Climate Center, and she served as the director of Californians for GE-Free Agriculture, a coalition that carried out education and policy advocacy on genetic engineering in agriculture. We have two 2025 BYA alumni who are with us this evening, who are also on the panel. The first one is Lily YangLiu. Lily leads two interconnected initiatives that address gaps in climate education and youth representation. Through the K to 12 Climate Literacy Initiative, she co-develops curriculum for grades 4 through 8 and advocates for early climate education. This program is currently being implemented and refined in schools across British Columbia. And as the director of a nonprofit dedicated to expanding youth participation in decision-making processes and spaces, she organizes youth delegations to the United Nations, International Monetary Fund, and World Bank. As an active member of YOUNGO, the official youth consultancy of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Lily helps manage and support a network of over 10,000 young climate advocates worldwide. She also serves as a youth advisor for Children First Canada, advocating for children's rights and civic engagement. Earlier this year, YangLiu was named one of the top 25 women of influence in Canada by the Women of Influence organization. Our second panelist is 2025 Broward Youth Award winner Sophie Tipper. In July 2023, Sophie joined the Colorado Youth Advisory Council, known as COYAC, which allows students to research and write policy memos that become law. Upon joining, she noticed that youth were not represented on any of the state's green task forces or committees. She decided that needed to change. Over the next year, she and her COYAC colleague, Ashna Shah, researched environmental issues impacting the state, met with experts and stakeholders, and came up with a policy memo that recommended ending youth advisors to the Colorado Department of Public Health Environmental Justice Board. Her team then drafted a bill that would require the board to include one voting and one non-voting youth member that presented to state lawmakers. The draft earned the sponsorship of senators and representatives working with COYAC. The bill, SB 25-055, was introduced to the Colorado legislature in January 2025. After several amendments, it was passed by Congress and signed into law by Governor Jared Polis in May. Sophie is now drafting a new bill to regulate plastic pollution. She says her advocacy work has not only helped her cope with climate anxiety, but has made quite a difference in her life. So I would like to introduce Renata, Lily, and Sophie to come up. And I'm so thrilled that we're all here tonight. I am going to pass over the facilitator hat to Renata, and I will leave the stage and I will be back to moderate questions. So those of you in the audience, please put in your questions in the chat. Thank you so much for having me, and have a great panel.
Thank you, Mona. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here. It's really an inspiration just reading the bios. So I really look forward to getting to know the two of you, Sophie and Lily, a little bit better and hear more about what you're doing. It is a time when I think inspiration is in short supply these days, or the need maybe is increased compared to some other times with all the challenges that we're all, I think, surfing around in. So I look forward to hearing more about your work. I'm also really happy to have this be a conversation, not just a back and forth. So if I think of a question I want to follow up on, I'd love to be able to ask that. And if you think of something you want to add or jump back or refer to or ask each other, I really welcome that kind of dynamic, organic, emergent dialogue. But let me just start with some softballs. Maybe we can start with Sophie first, and then Lily. Same question to both of you. Can you talk about the work that you're doing generally? Just give an overview and maybe build on what Mona just said. And maybe specifically what about that work got you the attention of the Broward Youth Awards and why you think they recognized you in this way.
Yeah, so I can start. Most of my work focuses specifically on state level policy. I have worked on a couple campaigns with my school district, so I do local campaigns occasionally, but like Mona was talking about, I'm on the Colorado Youth Advisory Council, and so for the past 3 years, I've really been working on finding environmental issues at the state that we can address through state level policy. So that's kind of like where the majority of my work lies.
Great. Well, we'll get into some more details in a minute. Because Sophie mentioned that, is it today that the legislature started back up again?
Yep.
Yes. So we'll hear more about what you've got in store for the year. How about you, Lily? Why did you get this award?
That's a great question. Honestly, I'm not so sure myself. I would love to ask that to the awards. Yeah. I think I started my climate journey focusing a lot on climate education. So I have a social media channel. I do a thing called Daily Climate News, and I run workshops for elementary schools. But then I realized the importance of mandatory climate education, something that doesn't exist where I'm from, British Columbia in Canada. So that's how I got into more policy. So doing advising for the provincial government and then eventually creating DMUN, which trains other young people to be able to engage in policy work on a more international scale.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about policy advocacy. I don't know how common it is, honestly, for people of any age to be drawn to policy work. I think in some cases it feels sort of distant or too wonky, or I mean, the whole system is set up to be a little bit intimidating or a lot intimidating. There's formalities to it. There's, I think there are historical barriers, to participating for certain people. And in some ways, I think it's designed to be a little bit inaccessible and a little mysterious. And so I would like to hear from each of you. We can start with you, Lily. What is it that you like about doing policy and advocacy work? What's the power in it for you? And what are you trying to accomplish in the long run? It also takes time, right? Policy is incremental. It's fraught with compromise. So we have to have a long view. So I would love to hear, why you got into it, what you like about it, and then what it is you're hoping will shift over time by using policy.
Yeah, definitely. I got started in policy work because I was very, very frustrated with just the lack of climate education in British Columbia. BC is lauded as like very progressive, but that's not reflected in our education system at all. And while I was running workshops and talking to teachers, I realized just like the lack of funding and real support coming from the provincial government. And that's why I started this coalition of different organizations, and we're still pushing for the mandatory climate education piece till this day. It's been like 3, 4 years. Yeah, it's been a time, but I really love policy because I get to meet so many people. Like our coalition has people, like we have organizations like Doctors for the Environment, we have grandparents, we have younger students from in elementary schools. So I get to meet so many amazing people with so many different perspectives, and I'm really grateful for that.
Mm-hmm. Can you just describe the coalition even a little bit more? Is it a coalition of individuals or is it a coalition of organizations, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's a coalition of NGOs. Well, it started off like that. We all met at a climate protest, actually. And but slowly it's expanded a lot more. So we have, different school clubs from different secondary schools in British Columbia, and individuals are also more than welcome to join our meetings and sign on to our open letters too.
Mm-hmm. Why do you work in coalition? Why do you like that model?
I think it's two things. One is like the support, because like policy it can be really isolating when you're just in it alone. You're just like reading draft text and you're like, what the hell is going on? So having coalition, you're able to like ask people, what does this acronym mean? Like, because policy is very inaccessible till this day. And also, again, just like bouncing ideas off of each other. And there's this, I think the climate space, it's really nice because a lot of our work is built off joy and love. And you really see that amplified when you work in a group.
Hmm.
And also, governments listen to you more when you are working within a larger group, too.
Uh-huh. You can have more influence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, Sophie, how about you? I'll remind you of the question. What drew you to policy work? What do you like about policy and advocacy work? And what in the long run are you hoping to change through that work?
Yeah, I think I'm one of the people who accidentally ended up in policy, which I don't think happens to a lot of people, but it sort of did to me. I had a friend in middle school who brought up the fact that we were wasting so many styrofoam trays a day. I go to a super big high school. I'm in a super huge district in the state, and we did some basic algebra and realized that our school district was wasting about 4 million styrofoam trays a year. And so, kind of with middle school naivety and a lot of optimism, we emailed the superintendent and we were like, we need to change this. And eventually, like you were talking about the time piece, it did take like 4 years, but we were able to do that. And then in high school, I just realized that that policy was so impactful, and that was just at my school. And so I was like, what else could I be doing? And that kind of led me to my youth organization, COYAC, and just being able to be on that council and make real state level change has been such an honor and a privilege. And I really hope to see in the future more youth being given those positions in those like decision making rooms. Like I am always in awe of Lily. She is so amazing with how many youth she sends in delegations to United Nations and other conferences. And I think, like she said, working in groups like my youth council, some of my best friends are on that youth council. It really does help pick you up because you can go to someone and be like, I don't understand what our bill draft says at all. And we helped write it. So can you like explain this to me? Because I'm not a legal expert. And so I think also being in a group really allows youth, especially, to feel comfortable asking questions and kind of managing that steep learning curve that there is with policy.
Mm-hmm. Is it does it demystify the work a little bit to be in groups like that and learning and unpacking the process and the language? There's a language to policy advocacy as well. Does it help kind of take away or mitigate some of that the barriers that people feel to engaging, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. Especially the program I'm a part of, we do monthly trainings, and sometimes it's like, how do you speak to media? How do you get media coverage on your policy? Our January training is always how to testify, and I think that is such an incredible skill to empower youth with. Because in the state of Colorado, every bill gets a committee hearing, which means you can always testify on any bill that's introduced. And so I think that that's a huge barrier that you've just broken down because a lot of us aren't 18 when we get involved in this work and we think we can't do these things unless we're able to vote, but breaking down that barrier, saying, no, you can go and testify and tell legislators exactly what you think about this policy. I think it does help clear a lot of those barriers.
Mhm. That's great. Um, well, Sophie, do you want to keep talking and answer the next
Sure.
question? And then we'll go back to Lily. I'd love to hear from each of you some recent successes and failures. And I think it's important to think about both. It really hurts to fail, but it's also, of course, important to learn from those, so-called failures. I'll just say quickly, you both said that it took you 4 years to win something. And I'll just say at CalCan, my work, it took us 4 years to get our first victory. 4 years of trying to introduce bills and getting them shot down. And, we had this big vision for what we wanted to see in the state of California by way of a suite of programs that would fund farmers to do climate beneficial practices on their land. And we did it, we carried it, we put it in 1 year. It didn't even get out of committee. The next year we got out of committee, the next year we got through the first house. The next year we lost again. But fast forward several years and California has a whole bunch of programs now that fund farmers to the tune of $1 billion so far. So but that's 17 years of work, right? So you really do have to be persistent and you have to leverage those failures and try to build on them. So I'd love to hear you just each talk a little bit more about the wins and the losses and the lessons and, how you kind of can keep going, in the face of especially the failures.
Yeah. So for successes, I think a really amazing thing for me was in August, we had a youth appointed to the state board. So like our bill went into effect, all the clauses went into effect, and that was like incredible because I think the whole time, the 2 years that bill took, it was almost like, this isn't real, or it's not going to happen, or this happened in committee and now I'm not even sure it's going to pass. So that feeling of like, oh my gosh, we actually did this, like there is a youth on that board, was amazing. I'm also super excited that General Assembly started today. We have a bill that's going to be introduced that works on polluters fines, making them more proportional to business size, um, which even it's definitely going to be an uphill battle with that one, but just the fact that we were able to get it introduced is a huge win. For failures, this past summer, Mona brought it up, I was working on a bill on plastic pollution, and we fought really hard for it. And it was just obvious it wasn't going to work. We couldn't get sponsorship. Stakeholders just started to refuse to email us back. Um, and so it's definitely a little bit heartbreaking when you've poured your heart and soul into something for a year for people to say, like, we're not doing it. But I think you just have to focus on the successes and realize, like we've been saying the whole night, that policy does take a lot of time, and there's just a lot to work through. And right now, especially for a lot of people, climate isn't a priority. And so moving towards, like I'm saying, even with the bill introduction, maybe it doesn't pass, but at least we're recognizing that this is a priority, that we need to be working on these things. Like that's still a win, and we need to recognize that.
I think that's a really interesting point. I think that in the legislature, progressive ideas, like ideas maybe ahead of their time, they have to be socialized, right? People have to be educated, and they have to sort of like get a lay of the land, especially if it's around something that's maybe not as familiar or a bit more technical, or has economic impact. So I think that you make a really good point. Bills aren't necessarily only to be won or lost. They also can be a tactic, right? To move a conversation forward, which is kind of what I hear you maybe saying. What pivot, having lost that this summer, what pivot have you got in mind, if any? Maybe you're still kind of licking your wounds and figuring it out, but
Yeah, honestly, we we still have the proposal and everything, so I'm sure we'll see next year if we can get sponsorship for it. It definitely has allowed me to, because our environmental committee that I chair had two proposals, the polluters fine and the plastic pollution. So it's definitely allowed me to focus more on the polluters fine, which has probably been good because I've been able to pour all my energy into that rather than kind of splitting it two directions. So yeah, I think right now it's just doing as much as I can for the bill that has a chance of passing. And then this summer we'll revisit whether the other one has a chance in the 2027 legislative session.
yeah, that's great. All right, Lily, how about you? Wins and losses. What are your stories?
Oh, recently, Demon, the organization I run that we send and train young people to different policy spaces, we signed a really cool MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with an intergovernmental organization. So that means that we can finally send young people into UN General Assembly for the first time, because even like ECOSOC accredited organizations couldn't do that. Um, I'm actually not sure why. You grow to learn that there are so many different loopholes that you have to jump through in policy work. So yeah, I'm very excited about that, and hopefully sending a really great delegation to General Assembly next. Well, this year. Oh wow, it's 26 already. That's insane. And ooh, failures. Well,
Yeah.
I talked about the 3-4 year mandatory climate education thing. That's still very much ongoing. We had a couple of meetings again, and we were talking to the ministry, and they're like, wow, it's not like an institutional priority right now, climate education. There's not enough funding, and they don't want to revisit the curriculum until 2030, which I think is a ridiculous timeline. We're trying to re-strategize and regroup, maybe doing things like going to the media to get more attention on the issue. But right now, we're in that stage, and it definitely feels really frustrating when you've been at it for so long.
Yeah, sort of getting shut out. Um, I'm going to just share just this one little moment I'm recalling from a protest where I live years ago now. And there was an older person, older than me even, that got up and said something into the microphone, went on a big speech about how we got to get the youth to save the world because we've messed it up, and you hear variations of that a lot, and it really made me angry when I heard that. I had a very strong emotional reaction, because it felt like he was kind of just putting the problem off on the young people, right, to solve. Sorry, we messed up. Good luck. Um, and you both have worked on things that are trying to put youth in positions of leadership and influence, in different jurisdictions, right? So I'd like to hear from you, maybe your reaction to that story, or that thing that I think people say a lot, especially older people. And then also, like, in contrast, well, why is it so important to have youth voices in those positions of power and influence? What is it that youth bring to the table that's so important, and why you fought so hard to get them there? Lily, do you want to start that one?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, first of all, on like why young people deserve to be in the spaces, I think because young people, first of all, they genuinely want to, they care about policy, they want to have a voice. And Sophie said something that I still think about. It's like, I want to be able to impact policy even if I can't vote. Voting is a really powerful mechanism for policy change. We don't have that. So I think it's really important that our voices are represented in other ways, right? And I think there's a lot of, um, well, I don't want to go into like oh, there's like certain things only young people can do. But I think like more broadly speaking, from my experience, like young people, we're good at mobilizing um, through social media, through like reaching global communities because we've grown up with access to these kind of platforms, right? So reaching out and learning from other people across the world, that has definitely shaped the way I view my own environmental advocacy and how I approach like my own way of like tackling different problems. So yeah, I think we deserve a say because we care, and people who care should be allowed to express their thoughts and help, build a piece to the puzzle. And the thing about the story, I definitely feel that. Like I've seen across the climate space, they're like, oh, it's your problem. You can deal with it. That's definitely very frustrating because we truly need intergenerational collaboration because there's so much to learn from like all generations, right? So to actually achieve change, we need to recognize that it's a collective issue. And that's sadly not something we see too much right now.
Mm, yeah. Thanks for that, Lily. What are your thoughts, Sophie?
I definitely agree with Lily about the, youth wanting to be involved and we should obviously let them. I also think there's a sense of urgency in youth that sometimes we don't see in adults, just because we have grown up with climate change as an idea our entire lives, which obviously a lot of adults haven't. The thing about that story to me is that I think it's a lot of like almost a little bit climate doom, which I'm not a big fan of. I think the best way to combat those feelings of there's nothing we can do about it is actually to do something. Because I think once you get involved, like Lily and I've been talking about the entire night, you get to meet so many incredible people and you get to work in these groups. And I think that's really what gives a lot of people hope is you get to go on these calls with all these other amazing people. And the other thing that that story reminds me of a lot is I wish more people had the mindset of, yes, it's my kids who are going to be dealing with it, but that's why I should care. Or like I should
Mm,
want my grandkids to grow up being able to hike in the mountains or being able to ski in the mountains. And I wish we had kind of that mindset shift of I should I should be doing this to leave a legacy behind that would be good for the planet, that my kids would be proud of. Is kind of the mindset shift I wish I would see more of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with both of you. You both said a variation of it in a way that it does require participation across the, multiple generations, not just, it shouldn't just rest on the shoulders of a few people. Um, if you were going, I'm sure this is not a hypothetical question to you both. If you were going to give youth advice about how to get started, I think you're both in positions where you actually probably are doing that regularly through trainings or, inviting people into your organizing spaces. But can you maybe boil down a few nuggets for us about how you try to bring others, youth especially, along, or adults? What the heck? Let's bring in everybody. Yeah. What's your advice for getting started or coping with the challenges of policy advocacy?
I can start if you're okay
Yeah.
with that, Lily.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sophie.
I think the first thing is honestly, school environmental clubs are really powerful. I think you get to meet a lot of cool people and you get to work on organizing skills without the pressure. Like, I feel like at school environmental clubs, it's kind of okay if you mess up the first two times. While, like, policy, sometimes it can be like stressful because you feel like you have to get it perfect. I love my school's environmental club. We give presentations to elementary schoolers and we do reservoir cleanups, and it's really taught me a lot about like organizing that kind of thing, but in almost like a low stakes environment, because if we mess up one fact to elementary schoolers, like nobody's gonna freak out on us. um, and then I also think the other thing for policy is starting local can also be really great, like local town halls, and just even if you're not speaking there, just sitting in and becoming more politically aware. A lot of cities and towns, at least near me, have youth councils that work on local policy. And I think for a lot of youth, that's a really good stepping stone. I kind of just like made the jump to state level policy, and it was definitely a very, very steep learning curve for me. And I think sometimes that I would have been a little bit better off if I had like started at town halls and then gone to state level policy. But yeah, I think if you're like me and you're kind of hesitant to take the jump, I think taking those smaller steps at your school or your town hall is kind of a really good place to start.
Excellent. How about you, Lily? What's your advice?
I think first of all is like understanding what you care about. Like even if it's just like sitting down, writing on a sheet of paper everything you care about, seeing if there's like any intersections between those, and then researching the hell out of these topics that you care about. So I think with research, you will have these moments where you're like, oh my God, this is a really cool solution. I really want to explore it further. And once you have that, I think that's when you should explore going into things like policy and advocacy. And I think the best way to really join policy is genuinely to like talk to as many people as possible, whether that's like cold emailing people or just like hitting them up on the street when you're at a protest. Because a lot of the people in the environmental space, they're very welcoming and they're very loving. So I'm sure they'll be like really happy to even like grab coffee with you. I've had so many people like take a chance on me and give me amazing advice and give me opportunities to engage deeper in policy work. So just talk to people. You don't lose anything.
Mm. Lily, for some reason, what you were saying there made me think about how paralyzed I think people can sometimes feel about getting involved. I think this is a time of that where it's easy to feel disconnected or jaded or cynical, or discouraged, and and overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude, right, of what is necessary. And so one thing I want to just check out this mental model that I was shared that was shared with me years ago that I'd be curious to see if you know about or if it resonates with you. I've seen different versions of it, but the most recent version that comes to mind is was put together by a woman named Ayana Johnson. There's a middle name. She's a climate activist and a scientist. I might be saying her name wrong. So it's a mental model. It has three circles. It's a Venn diagram. And it's a tool for helping people think about how they could take action. And one of the circles is what's necessary. One of the circles is what I love, which is what made me think, Lily, about what you said. What do I love? What am I good at? What do I care about? And then the other circle is what's possible. And so where those things intersect, where that in the center of that Venn diagram is where there's the most like possibility for success. What I love, what I'm good at, and what's necessary. Sorry, what I love, what's necessary, and what's possible. And so I'm just curious if you want to like sort of riff on that a little bit. Like, does that make sense to you as a model? Do you think it's helpful for to share with people as a way to help them move towards action? Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. I think I've heard of that in like a business context of all places,
Yeah,
but not
that's why I say it.
environmental.
I think it was in several, I've seen it in several different spaces. I'm going to pull up the woman's name so I make sure to attribute it right. But yeah, I think it's
Yeah,
useful
that's
in many
really
ways.
interesting.
Yeah. What do you,
Huh. Oh shoot, sorry.
does it sound useful or does it resonate to you or would you
I think
adapt?
the first two bands, definitely. But I was actually talking to a friend about, I guess, the third one, what's possible. And I was telling him that like I live in a really interesting state of, I guess, what people call delusion sometimes. I I believe that, I believe in the best. I believe that with enough effort, with enough people, with enough care, anything is truly possible. It just depends on how much you are willing to put in, how much sacrifice. And yeah, that's why I guess I'm in international environmental policy. Like cops, they really, really suck a lot of the time, but they can also do a lot of good. And I try and look towards that good and that possibility whenever I like approach the environmental movement, because right now it is so scary, as you talked about. There is so much horrible things going on in the world, and it sometimes feels like leaders don't really care. But if we go into this mindset of, I guess, oh, I'm young or I'm only one person, I can only do this much, you will never reach for the most. And I think that's what we should be doing right now, demanding for the most, because we deserve that.
Mhm. Oh, Corey chatted us to help me find the right attribution. It's Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, and she wrote a book called "What If We Get It Right: Visions of Climate Futures." And so I think that's really kind of jumping off from what you said, Lily. That question of what's possible is a really slippery question because if you shoot too low, you're not going to be ambitious enough and get what's necessary done. But if you shoot too high, you could be easily dismissed, right? And spend your whole life just tilting at windmills, So that's a really interesting piece of this is that feasibility question. What do you think, Sophie? What do you want to add to this?
No, I think Lily's right. I think that what's possible is, I don't know that I agree with it because I think I'm one of the people who kind of like limit myself. Um, and I also agree though that doing what you love and finding a reason to kind of show up to the meetings you really don't want to go to, and reminding yourself whether it's just your love for conservation and you love being outdoors, or you're really into like oceans and you want to see less plastic there, whatever your thing is. I think that's one of the things that's kind of great about the environmental movement is there's so many different sectors. If you're into legal, you can fight for the environment that way, or if you're an ocean or a mountains person or conservation, pollution, like there's so many different avenues. And I think everyone can find something about the environmental movement to work on that they love. And I really think staying connected to that passion is what keeps you going when you do have those failures or just when things are taking a really long time to get past.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, I have one more question before we pivot to any audience questions. and any last words that you have to offer. And that question is, what is a question you have for each other? Whoever
I
wants to
can
go first.
start.
You can go. Okay.
I'll ask Lily first.
Okay.
So I will talk about Lily for days because she always inspires me so much. But I would love to know who is like the first person, your initial inspiration, like somebody you saw who was like, wow, this is really possible. And it can be like anyone, like your best friend or a celebrity, like anything like that.
Oh my God. This is such a cliche. I remember I moved to Canada in grade 5, so 2019. And I saw on like TV Greta Thunberg. And before then, I didn't really know what climate was because, oh, sorry. Um, should not have said that. I say a lot of bad things about British Columbia's environmental education. China's much, much worse. It's never talked about. And I didn't know what climate change was, even though my health was directly impacted by it with a lot of um, asthma and then respiratory issues. No idea what climate change was. So I saw Greta Thunberg talking so passionately about this. And I was like, what the hell is that? So I researched it and I realized how it impacted my life since I was 2 or 3 years old. And that's how I became very, very frustrated by the lack of climate literacy. So seeing her like out there, just sharing her opinions, thoughts in front of world leaders was inconceivable to me as a kid. But seeing her stand up and do it so many times, it made me believe that young people first deserve a voice, and second, we can do it. We can be anywhere, and we can say our truth. Yeah,
Excellent.
actually, I love that question a lot, Sophie. Can I ask the same thing for you?
Yeah, of course. Um, I always tie my initial inspiration back to this TED Talk. It's called How the Oceans Can Clean Themselves. It's by Boyan Slat. He runs the Ocean Cleanup Company. If you haven't seen that before, it's super cool. They're using crazy engineering and technology, and they've discovered that 1,000 of the world's rivers contribute to 90% of the ocean's plastic pollution, and they're cleaning it up and they're helping give local communities jobs, and they're turning the plastic into really cool stuff. They did a fundraiser where they made it all into sunglasses, which was super cool. But I just remember seeing this TED Talk, and he was 18 years old at the time, and he'd already done all this amazing stuff with his engineering background. And it was the first time that I realized I think you didn't need a college degree to be involved environmentally. I just kind of assumed, oh, nobody will listen to you. Like, you have to be 22 and have your bachelor's and like be really educated on the issue. And I think seeing him on that stage for the first time, and that TED Talk went like viral, it has tons of views on it. It was like, wow, people are listening to this 18-year-old because he is passionate and he has done his own research, and he did it all without a college degree. And he's just doing incredible work. So I think he was really like one of my initial inspirations, was just seeing that video.
Great question, and great answers. Thank you both. We're going to move into some questions Mona's going to bring in. Just before we do, I just want to close out my part of this by reading a quote that my sister texted me a couple days ago that you may have heard before, but I just feel like I want to share it with you right now. And it's not attributed, so I can't say who said this. This is the quote. This, my dear, is the greatest challenge of being alive, to witness the injustice of this world and not allow it to consume our light. And so if I don't get a chance before we wrap up this session, I just want to thank you both for being such lights, such bright lights in this work. It's truly inspiring, and I really appreciate all of the work that you're doing and all of the beauty and light that you're bringing to it. And smarts, my goodness. Great work. Thanks for joining me in conversation. Mona, do you want to step in and take it from here?
I am here. Okay, great. I've been listening and people are listening and one person was like, "Where can I attend more of these?" So this is going really great. So we have a question for Sophie. What are the sources of data that you got to collect information for your bill?
Ooh, this is a really good question. So we start researching about a year before we even like present the bills to legislators in July. So a lot of it actually comes initially from like scientific papers, and I just kind of get some background on the topic. And then most of it is government reports and previous legislation. We base a lot of our work on previous legislation. It might not be from the state of Colorado, but a lot of times we'll look at California or like New York when we're looking at climate legislation, just because especially if they've done their own policy measures, there's normally some data to back up whether they're working or not. So that can be a really good source for us.
Okay, so I'm going to do something a little unorthodox. I'm going to ask you some questions that it will serve as a bit of a preview to the next panel. So the next panel is about emotional responses to climate change, but I truly think that since in your bio, one of your bios, you mentioned climate anxiety, that I could ask you a few questions, just one or two, knowing that our next panel is all about the emotional responses to climate change. So, let's see here. I'm going to pull up. Oh, actually, we have one more question before I ask my sneak peek question. Um, is there any conferences you recommend to attend or websites to research environmental issues?
As for conferences, honestly, I would say if you go onto the Brower Youth Award page, there's a lot of organizations that people run on there that have really good conferences. I just got one today that was from Earth Echo? No, Lily, help me out. Did you get this
Yeah,
email
I
too?
think it is Earth Echo. No, Earth
Oh,
Echo is really cool. They do ocean stuff, and I've heard a lot of really great things about them, and I think it's open for everyone. It's called the Youth Leadership Summit. So if you want to meet like young people doing conservation, especially ocean conservation, I think it's a really great opportunity.
yeah. So that I guess that would be my advice is anybody who's a Brower Youth alumni. I think a lot of their organizations do summits, and they're all amazing.
Oh, and about like getting, I guess, literacy and learning about environmental issues, I have this thing. It's like Google Alerts. So you can like sign up for daily emails. So you get like 10 different news articles every single morning about like a specific issue. Like I have one for climate change and then one for like global politics. So I know what's going on in the world and in environmental legislation.
Okay, great. So I'm going to ask our sneak peek questions. The whole panel will be about emotional responses to climate change. I'm going to only ask two quick questions. The first one is how do you stay emotionally open to the climate crisis without burning out or shutting down?
Um, I heard this quote from my friend Amara, and it's something I try and carry through my environmental work, and it's that the revolution must be joyful. So, trying to find these ways of joy, even if you are working in intense times of stress and you have a lot of work. So like even like quick things like, oh, I'm gonna go out on a 15-minute nature walk. So setting tiny pockets of time to reconnect with, what you care about, people you care about, and having a network is so important to avoid climate anxiety and burnout.
Yeah,
Excellent.
I think Lily introduced me to that quote at BYA Leadership Week, and I love it. I think it's like one of the best quotes I've ever heard, and I completely agree.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more because I want to keep it short. I don't want to use all the questions for next week. So the next one is, what are some practices you use to move from isolated emotions and experiences towards growing in community? Basically, how do you elevate something from just I feel it to we feel it in community, and which becomes sort of a support?
I think honestly, the biggest thing is talking to people, putting yourself in those spaces, whether it's your local community or your environmental club at school. I think once you talk to people about it, you'll realize, especially if you're with youth, that a lot of youth feel the exact same way as you. And that's kind of freeing from your own isolation, is to realize I'm not the only person who feels this way.
Excellent. What about you, Lily?
Yeah, definitely. Like finding that community is the first step, and just putting yourself out there and meeting people and realizing it's okay to be vulnerable. Like so many people feel these emotions. So stay in conversation with others.
Okay, excellent. So I am going to wrap this up because I want our listeners to come to our second panel. Um, and the second panel, I have to actually look it up. Does anyone here know the second panel? I think it's the Jeremy, do you know the second panel?
I
I
do. Yes. It is coming up on January 29th at 5:30 p.m.
Thank you. That was so much faster than I could have done it. The 29th, 5:30 p.m. Is our second panel about emotional responses to climate change. We will have two other alumni present from the 2025 Broward Youth Award cycle. It's going to be very amazing. I suggest everyone who came tonight come to that one. We will dive in and be vulnerable, and it will be fantastic. It will be amazing. Tonight's was equally as amazing, and I want to thank Renata and Sophie and Lily, and thank you so much to everyone who came. We had a great turnout, and I will see you all at the next panel. Thank you. Goodbye.